Software as a medical device, the challenges that lie ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here and choosing to engage in a conversation about challenges facing software as a medical device instead of lunch. Thank you very much. My name is Susan Xu. I'm a healthcare reimbursement advisor and also the author of a book titled Healthcare Reimbursement Maze: The Ecosystem Regulates Market Access to Medical Innovation. I have the privilege of serving as the moderator of today's discussion. So let's dive right in by introducing our panelists. The first, we have Richard Houlihan, the CEO of EirMed, a company that provides training and helps companies with data submission for EirMed. Richard, what is EirMed and how it is related to software as a medical device?
Okay, hello everybody. I've got a few notes just in case. Also being blinded by the lights. So, I don't do medical devices. I don't know an awful lot about medical devices, but I do know about data. And the European Commission's medical device database is EirMed, and that is all about the data. That requires your data to get put into EirMed. Now, EirMed consists of 6 modules: actors, devices, certificates, vigilance, clinical investigations, post-market surveillance. And if you wish to sell your devices in Europe, once EirMed is mandatory, if you wish to sell your devices in Europe, your device data has to be in EirMed. The software as a medical device, that also has to comply completely with EirMed, with MDR, IVDR, whichever it fits under. And at this stage, the notified bodies are actually asking people for their EirMed strategy. And if you don't have an EirMed strategy, you will not get your certification. This is one of the blockers at the moment. I had a quick look at the size of the medical device market, the software as a medical device market. And in 2022, one estimate I saw was $1.4 billion, expected to rise to over $10 billion by 2028. And following that, I had a quick look at the EirMed figures, because in EirMed you register a special device type software, and there's currently 946 MDR software entries and 301 IVDR entries. All of these are expected to rise as with the market. But if you need anything to do with EirMed, just come talk to us. Thank you.
So we also have Peter Schlecht. Did I get right? Okay. Peter is a serial entrepreneur and now the CEO and founder of Braingrade, a company dedicated to giving everyone a brain upgrade. Peter is also a member of the Mensa Club, an organization of individuals of high IQs. So Peter, has your involvement with Mensa inspired your business focus on brain enhancement?
First of all, nobody ever pronounced my last name better than you did, Susan. Thank you very much for that. And it was more like a branding effort for myself. So, and obviously my interest for the brain. And personally, and as an entrepreneur, we have all the goal to maximize a positive future here. And I believe if we can improve the human brain, this would be, as our most important tool, one way to do it.
Great. So also our next panelist is Bence Torok, a software development manager and expert in Agile and Waterfall. So could you give us a brief crash course on Agile and Waterfall in just 1 minute?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. Actually, usually people see waterfall as an outdated kind of methodology and Agile as a superior one, fixing all the flows, the so-called flows that waterfall has. But So let me tell you this, I do like Agile, I'm an Agile project manager, but Agile is not better. This is my unpopular opinion. Agile is not better than Waterfall, it is just different. And the tasks should define the tool, meaning the project manager is responsible for selecting the appropriate management system, management methodology. And if I may say, the upper management and the investors are responsible for hiring a project manager who will ensure that the most efficient methodology will be selected for the task we have.
Thank you. So last but not least, we have Dr. Arron. He's a doctor, a general practitioner in London, who also founded a software company used in medical training and co-founded CodeMed, an organization that teaches clinicians how to code. Arron, why do you believe it's important for doctors to learn how to code?
Good question. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think it's fair to say it's not just the NHS, but there's lots of problems in healthcare that need addressing, and I think that creates a market for anybody who's looking to produce digital health products or software as medical devices. And with all these problems that exist, I believe that healthcare professionals being on the front line are the individuals that understand the problem the most, and in a lot of cases they're the people experiencing the problem alongside patients as well. So the whole idea behind teaching healthcare professionals how to code is they understand the problem and they can work with teams to develop a digital health product. But actually, if they not only understand the problem, but also have the technical skills to be able to not necessarily build the product, but conceptualize and understand what the solution is and how the solution should be built, then they can work with managers and software developers, and as well as deliver their clinical expertise to effectively build a better software as a medical device or digital health product. So yeah, that's essentially why we teach healthcare professionals how to code.
That sounds great. I think that's maybe make a doctor more acceptable of a software as a medical device. So now let's transition to the panel discussion. We have a panel with very diverse experience and expertise. So from your respective perspectives, could you share your insights on the potential risks associated with the use and also business of software as a medical device? Do you want to go first? We can just go around.
So I suppose, first of all, with the software as a medical device, classifying it as a medical device is the first thing that becomes an issue. And you can talk to notified bodies. Notified bodies will help you out with this. But don't forget, notified bodies are giving advice. It's not legally binding. It is the manufacturer ultimately that decides if it's a medical device or not. So one of the other things, and any of the answers I'm going to give are all in relation to MDR, IVDR, EirMed. Everything is going to be tied to Europe. In Europe, you have to have a QMS system, but don't forget there are specific standards as well that relate to the software as a medical device that you have to have. And if your software as a medical device does not meet the definition of a medical device under the EU rules, if it's going to be an accessory to a medical device, then it still falls under the scope. So you have to remember that as well. Now, the architecture of the software, it has to integrate everything, all the risk controls and things like that. But you cannot forget your cybersecurity, you cannot forget your GDPR. And the GDPR under Article 22, it actually places a lot of restrictions on the automated processing of data and profiling, which could then cause some problems with the clinical tests, with the software updates, etc. But then you've got your UDI requirements. Software that's commercially available on its own or standalone software in Europe must have a UDI. Otherwise, you don't have to have it. But if it has a UDI, it has to go into EirMed. It has to follow all the rules there. Now, EirMed itself, under the MDR side, has 104 data points. A lot of these are also multiples. So be aware of the risks of creating systems yourself to do this. Outsource it. If not to us, to somebody else, but outsource it and let the people who are used to doing this on a daily basis take care of it. It'll avoid a lot of pain for you.
I would like to focus on two risks. First of all, I think software as medical devices have so many chances that one of the biggest risks are the external risk that not every patient who can potentially gain from such software as a medical device gets actually the software as a medical device because of regulatory, or because, and this is kind of then I think the second risk, that it's difficult that you really align and have all the stakeholders in the boat and you have it covered. Because if you only lose one, then most likely you will not be successful. So, an example, when the patient in the end is not using it, it's not helping. But most often, kind of the biggest problem is either the payer, that you have a valid business model with it, so that you can also spend enough money to gain enough patients, and the trust and invest towards the doctors and the physicians who are often kind of to change their mind is a big risk for you. And you have to have all of that aligned to really have a successful product then in the hand of your patients.
Yeah, I actually do agree, and also you need to be really aware that your software will affect human lives. So this is why this field is heavily regulated. And many people, many companies see these regulations as a burden, as something you have to do and will produce 1,000 pages of documents that will gather electric dust in a cloud somewhere. But I do think that you should understand the reason behind these regulations, the logic behind the system they built in and they require. And if you do so, these regulations, these foes, so to say, will be your friends actually, because they will help you produce a valuable, safe, and market-ready software that will, well, bring in the big bucks, if I may.
There's some really good points raised, and I completely see your point about how regulation on one hand can be seen as a bit of a blocker for innovation. As a healthcare professional myself, who also codes, you see problems on a day-to-day basis, and you want to build solutions. You want to get them out there, but then obviously it's a software as a medical device, and you can't just build an app and sell it anymore. It has to be properly accredited. And as a clinician, I want to be using software that is accredited. I want to use software that I know is safe and effective. And has been properly validated. So there's a kind of double-edged sword from that perspective. One of my points in terms of risks that really stands out for me is data security. And we're living in an increasingly digital age now, but there was a time, and still is in some hospitals, where everything is paper notes, right? And those paper were then stored in a cupboard, in a GP practice or in a hospital, and accessed whenever they needed to be accessed. That data was secure there. And then we moved on to EPR systems where there'll be a server in a hospital. But now we're moving to an age where, patients can access their data on their mobile phone or a personal device. That data has now moved outside of the clinical setting and is now on a cloud, on the patient's personal device. And that comes with a whole host of security issues.
Yeah, we already touched upon the health regulation, and there was previous session dedicated on that. So just quickly, what's your view on that, and what do you think the impact of regulations on software as a medical device? Do you want to go first? You already mentioned it. If you have any.
Yeah, I think overall it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we are making sure that people are producing products that are validated and are safe, because ultimately some of these tools, particularly AI tools, are making clinical decisions that really do affect people's lives. And if we get them wrong, they can have catastrophic consequences. But I think on the other end, it naturally will put a dampener on innovation, and people who don't necessarily have the funding but have a product that has been built might not be able to get their product out there and use, which could go on to benefit lots of people. So I think there's two sides to it.
Bence, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, I'm happy that you mentioned AI, because that's the new thing, that's the future, actually. But that raised a thought in me that so regulations will always be outdated in a sense that they cannot follow the high pace that IT moves on. And for example, each and every day they found new zero exploits, for example, talking about cybersecurity, and regulations will never be able to follow that pace. So, as a software as a medical device provider or developer, you sometimes you are in a situation where you have to implement a cutting-edge technology, implement an update that will keep your software safe from an exploit, but the regulations are not aware of that solution or technology. They are not, well, the written regulation is not aware of that. So you have to be able to fit that into the necessary documentation without knowing how to do that exactly. So that's a challenge.
Regulation is a good thing. But, and it's a big but, we shot with many regulations way over the goal. So these external costs kind of hurting the patients and hurting the companies, because nearly no company and innovator or doctors or clinical trial has an unlimited amount of capital and resources. So you have a limited amount, and depending on how much you're losing on regulatory, then you cannot spend it on others. Like when you have a company with a CEO and overhead who's kind of doing all the other things, and then you have one regulatory person, one is doing kind of your quality control, and then you have one doing your accounting, and then you have kind of another one who's doing your tax, and then you have one engineer kind of who's running the show. I think that's not kind of what we want regarding regulatory. And the development is going faster and faster. So when we want to have this level of regulation, then we have to adapt kind of also the institutions so that they can follow the speed and be there. And a fun fact I heard last week, I don't know if it's true, maybe you can verify it. The farmer, or for farmer, are in the European Union 1,257 people responsible for also regulatory purposes. For MedTech are, everyone can guess for yourself, 27. I think it says where, at least in Europe, a few of the problems are coming from.
So, in the EirMed team, when I left in 2019, there was 23 people. Now the EirMed team is over 50 people. So while there's a very small amount of people managing the regulations, there's a huge amount on the IT side. On the business side of the medical device part of EirMed, there's about half a dozen. But on top of that, then they fall back on the lawyers. And the lawyers, these are some of the people who've had loads of fun with these regulations. Because and I've got completely off my script here, but the regulations were very ambiguous. We read one thing into it. The business manager read a different thing into it. The IT guys start developing something. And then all of a sudden, you've got the lawyers coming in and going, well, actually, this kind of changes. And then we'd go to the MDCG, and they'd go, well, actually, this kind of changes. And then we go back to the working group meetings. So in all of this, there's actually hundreds of people involved but it's like herding cats. Everybody has a different opinion. So from that perspective, yeah. I mean, from the business point of view, you guys have costs, time, documentation, data management. You have to jump through hoops for MDR. You have to jump through hoops for the FDA, for the Australians, for the Chinese. And then we come along with EirMed, which is very, very different to the good ID. So, yeah, you guys have my sympathy. But, going back to what you said, the regulations are a good thing. These things are supposed to be there for transparency. In 2012, when the PIP case broke, I was sitting in a little place in Ireland. I was working on EirMed at the time. But they started talking about the PIP case and how disgraceful the European Union was at tracking problems. It dawned on me then that I was actually looking after what they were talking about. But nobody can look up anything. There was no transparency. Even now, we're still waiting for EirMed to come through, which is another argument. I'm very close to the time there. Okay, back to you, Susan.
Yeah, okay.
Can I add one thing? I think we shouldn't let it go that negative cases are dictating regulatory. We should kind of look more on the positive cases and try to dictate with that regulatory, and kind of we all kind of as the ecosystem telling these stories, because I think the storytelling in this is very important, and then more getting kind of to a mindset of minimal viable regulatory and not like what are the 1,000 cases that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always have to have a balance. I mean, to wrap up our positive notes, do you have any advice for our audience? Who want to go first?
Okay, I'll go as I'm closest. For EirMed, and everything I'm doing is about EirMed, by the way, and it's any of you guys wanting to sell into Europe, you're going to eventually have to be dealing with this anyway. For EirMed, make sure everything matches what's on your labels. For software as a medical device, you don't necessarily have to label the device, but it has to be in your IFUs, it has to be on your website, it has to be somewhere that's updated regularly. Make sure it's updated regularly and it matches. And the other thing, don't wait until EirMed is mandatory. It's all working fine now. You can get your device data in now, because when that tsunami comes in a year's time, it's all going to fall apart. So make sure you get all your data in as quickly as possible.
I don't think that any one of you need my advice, but my recommendation is really get all of these different stakeholders cleared and on green as early as possible.
Well, as an advice, I would say that Agile will not work out of the box if you would like to use it for a MedTech software, but it's worth the trouble. I mean, you need to be able to change Agile's way of working to fit into the regulations that we discussed, but as a result, you will have a more effective, a more effective way of working and producing a software with Agile.
So I can't speak for the technical aspects of regulation, but what I can say for those of you who are clinicians out there looking to build an app or software for healthcare, is to, before you start building it, is to actually look at the regulation, look at what is expected of you from that perspective, because you can build a product, have it looking great, get really excited about it, and then you get to this point where you realize that it actually requires regulatory approval, and that's something you hadn't looked into beforehand. So yeah, my advice would be for any healthcare professionals out there, look at the regulation and look at what's expected for you in order to get that product that you're thinking about on the market.
All right, our time is up. Please join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. And thank you very much for being here and sticking around. Thank you.